your mind, lost in
That's kind of what comes with being a part of the military.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the stories that I dealt with, I went from briefing my commander and 2 weeks later burying him and being a part of his funeral, and that's how fast it can happen. So he was in Afghanistan, and when he rotated in, I rotated out, and about 2 weeks later, he was killed. So him and
Jesus.
it was a total of 16 people that died that day. It was 8 from my unit and 8 from another unit, and I was part of the funeral team that buried 3 of them. So, and it
I,
it it happens fast, man. You know, you never know when tomorrow's too late to say sorry or be apologetic for something that you said.
right. I think that's one thing, and this is probably a very like stereotypical question. Why would you join the military? Why would you serve your country, knowing that this could be a reality for you? That you may have to bury loved ones, you may have to bury friends that you care about, you may put yourself in extreme danger and suffer the consequences. Maybe you want to walk me through that. Like what made you want to serve?
So for me, I went in '94, and
Okay, around the like around the war in Iraq.
so a little bit after that,
Okay,
and it was during a time of peace. The first Gulf War had ended, and I just got married right out of high school, and needed a job, and my skills were limited at the time with experience and everything else. So that's what drove me that direction. Was needing an income, needing health insurance, and stuff like that. And it's one of those situations where you think, well, what are the odds that anything really could happen? And then you look at the college money because I wanted to go to school, but I didn't have the money for school. And they start telling you about all the traveling that you're going to get to do, and you hear all the good stuff, and they mumble about the bad stuff. So you don't really think about that stuff. And
no,
it's like, well, just like for me, the big thing at that time was, well, I just got married. What's the likelihood that my first place that I'm going to go is Korea? Oh, that's very highly unlikely. But the good thing is that there's a lot of places that you and your wife can go and see and everything else. And guess where my first duty station was? It was Korea. So I mean, I got married and went to basic training, AIT, and then Korea. So it was a year and a half before I got to be with my wife again. So,
oh wow,
so it,
long distance before the internet.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
That's tough.
That was the days of phone. You had to go get prepaid calling
Phone
cards.
cards, yeah, they were not cheap. They were from those very expensive.
No, how about AT&T really got us because when I was in Bosnia, so the first deployment I ever did was Bosnia, and I'll never forget this. The only way we could
So
call
this
home,
is after Korea.
yep, this is after Korea.
Okay,
We were stationed in Germany, and just talking about phone cards made me think about this. So
I
you
love this.
you went and bought a phone card, and when you used it from Bosnia, because the number you were calling was a military US number in Germany, it routed you from Bosnia to the United States and from the United States back to Germany. So that $20 phone card that you got lasted about 10 minutes before it was gone.
Yeah,
So yeah, it was crazy.
it was a journey. It was a trip, man. It's just, it's honestly a real pleasure because veterans are one of those people where you get people that they don't want to talk, because oh, it's not respectful. or you have those where like, oh, you're not going to understand, because they're veterans, they actually serve. You just sat on your ass in a fucking call center for 50 years and collected your paycheck.
Yeah.
Fucking moron, So it's just, I mean, like, even in your case, it's just like in the moment, like, I'm married, I need to figure shit out. Oh shit, can't see my wife. Well, we'll figure that out.
Yep.
What was the like? Is that the type of attitude that you kind of developed as you continued in the military? You just kind of went
Yeah.
one step at a time.
So every time it got to the point where I was getting ready to get out, I wanted out of the military. I was young, I was dumb,
Rebellious.
yes, and I did not want to stay in. And every time it got close to getting out, I realized how unprepared I was to get out, and I would end up reenlisting. And I ended up doing 20 years. And now that I look back at it, I'm glad because of what I have now. But the struggles that went through it, I still to this day don't know how me and the same girl that was married right out of high school is still together. But
It's rare, but it happens.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about the fact that so I did a total of 68 months in Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, those three locations. You add all the training time, you add a year in Korea. So you probably figure a good 40% of my 20 years I was away from my family. And you add all that time and then you add the things that happened after 9/11 and
Mhm.
the transition that happened because I will be the first to admit that I was a different person when I came into what I am now. And I was a more happy go lucky. I like to tell jokes, and everybody used to tell me you're going to end up being a comedian standing on a stage somewhere, and that all changed after 9/11. And so the fact that she's still with me is a testimony to her because
I want to share a story with you. My dad, he did plumbing and heating. I grew up in a blue collar community outside of New York City,
mhm,
it's called Rockland County. My dad had this customer. She was a widow. Her husband worked in the World Trade Center, and the day that it happened, they had a massive fight before he left for work. And to make a long story short, when he left, she basically told him, like out of anger, she's like, I hope you drop dead.
mm,
He died that day. So she felt guilty years after, blaming herself for killing her husband. And my dad would tell us is that no matter what you say or do, you can never change a moment. All you can do is build from what you have now
I
and
agree.
not focusing on the past. I was not old enough to remember it, but I can kind of understand the mentality of why people would change. I mean, a whole blanket of security, a belief system that most all Americans believed in, like just shattered.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna tell you, there's been a lot of good that came from all that time over there because I've got to now that I'm thinking a lot clearer. I appreciate things a lot more because you take before I never really thought about the stuff that ambulance, paramedics and doctors and stuff really go through. But when you see the crap that I've seen over there, and then you take somebody that sees similar stuff every day. Can you imagine a guy that works as an EMT in New York City or something like that? You know the stuff that's on his mind. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have learned to appreciate things um, a lot more since those times. And I think that's also another reason for me writing the book that I'm writing. And I also know that's a part of the nonprofit that I'm starting. And I think I think that's also another foundation to where I've gotten myself today, is because I can fall back on knowing that, hey, I'm not the only person that this trauma has affected. It affects other people. I just had a guy on my show yesterday. He was a British soldier. He was in the British Army, and he said something that I just it just shocked me because I never thought about it. But he said that when he had he used the term mate. He said, I had a mate that committed suicide. That we have a lot of veterans that are killing ourselves, and it just shocked me because I was like, man, your veterans over there are killing themselves too. And it just dawned on me that it's not an American Army thing. It's just a trauma thing. It's a human reaction to trauma that is not being healed. And if you let it fester and you don't get it taken care of, it's like any other disease. It will continue to grow and affect other things.
Because you're still dealing with human beings.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we all have to have a right to protect our country.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. Anybody that thinks that's not the case, you're stupid. I'm going to be honest with you, because to trust another side that they're going to accept your borders and your rules, no, it's not how the world works. And it's definitely not how people works. But the thing is, when you have those people that are risking their lives, putting themselves at risk, and then you have the situation in this country where veterans are not properly cared for, they're not properly funded. Programs such as ones that work with psychedelics and other types of compounds like nootropics and things are heavily regulated because they're not legal in this country. So all of the work that can be done can't be done because of pure stupidity and regulations that make no sense and should not apply. Because, like you said, even on the other side, you're risking the lives of those that are taking a risk for themselves.
Yep.
Hello? Like, what the hell?
Yep. And a lot of this also, it also goes back to greed. You know,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Big pharma is, until they can figure out how to control something, they're not going to allow stuff like this just to come in again. And they've got it controlled. When they made psychedelics, LSD, and that a Schedule II drug, at the end of the day, they've got it completely controlled now. You're not going to just get that overturned overnight, and that's the problems that they're having. Is the people that have done the research, and there is a lot of testimonials out there of people that have gone out of the United States and come back and said, "Holy crap, this works."
Well, they've been doing MDMA therapy for veterans, which, from what I've heard from other podcasts, it's really phenomenal. I mean, it really helps PTSD, trauma, all of these conditions that, again, happen when you are out in combat, which is pretty obvious again.
Yeah, I had a guest on last month that was talking about mushrooms and how it affects and why it works, and what it does to the brain, and all those types of things. Because I am interested in that side of it, because I do want to get off the medication that the VA has got me on, because I don't like the side effects, and you know I I don't want to be on drugs my whole life. I eventually want to get over, maybe not healed, but I want to have a normal life,
Right.
and I think it's important, because I'm a firm believer that in your life you can't have good without bad.
Do you know anybody that needs to get lost in the groove? Well, why not share that experience with them? we would really appreciate it, and it helps us grow as a podcast. So, with that, let's jump back to today's episode, shall we?
You know, if your whole life is just here, well, that's the line that you show when you're dead. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
that line. You know, a good sign of life is ups and downs. You know,
Correct.
so you have to have both in your life. And
Right.
when you're just drugged, you know, well, you don't get that. You know,
Right.
and so
I just wanted to, my apologies, I just wanted to make a correction. MDMA and mushrooms or shrooms, they're two different things. MDMA is a synthetic compound, whereas with psilocybin, they can concentrate it and extract it, but it does come in a natural form. Sorry.
yep, yeah, they are different, and but they're still the same. The process is still the same.
It's still the same, correct? Yeah. But you make a really good point is, look, I don't want to be one of those people where medication is bad. I have hypothyroidism. I take medication every single day. People have conditions, and it's really beneficial to keep a healthy life.
Yep.
However, there are things such as trauma, anxiety, PTSD. These are things that affect our brain, and they affect our brain because certain neurons and links in our brains are not properly connected or overlapping or causing too much pressure, which causes these episodes, these issues. And fixing the problem with medication, I understand that. But again, there's these side effects. And do you really want to keep somebody on a pill for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years? That seems like a really long time to be on medication.
Especially when it's not a cure. Because all they're really
No.
replacing is what your body makes naturally. They're replacing. They're making you provide yourself with dopamine. You know, to give yourself so you're not depressed. You know,
Right.
and I mean, in the short form, that's basically what they're doing. You know, and at the end of the day, just like with anything else, your body is going to get accustomed to you providing it, and it will stop doing it. So, you know, you don't keep taking cold medicine when the symptoms are gone.
Correct.
You know, and that this is exactly what we're doing here. There is forms of therapy. There's forms of things out there to where you can get to where the symptoms are no longer required of medicine. And we're the VA and big pharma. They don't want that step to come in place. They want you to be on these meds because it's, hey, keep taking them, keep buying them. You're cured. You're living a normal life. Life's good. So as long as you're buying their meds and the insurance is paying for it, well, life is good. It's a win for them. They get their big bonuses. You aren't out there hurting yourself, so it's a win-win, isn't it?
Unfortunately, that is the case. But there is a really good win-win. I think if you've heard of the MAPS Foundation, they're in the process right now of getting by next year MDMA therapy federal FDA approved. And I think that's an incredible step because once you do that, yeah, look, let's be real. This is going to be expensive for veterans. It's not, a cheap thing that you call up TRICARE or whatever and they take care of. No, no, no.
Right.
But it's a step in the direction that is now possible for all veterans across all scopes. So I see that as a big win-win.
I do too. It may take years
Yeah.
before it becomes, before enough people are making it or have gotten it to where it's affordable, you know. But yeah, I do agree. It is definitely a win, and it's in the right steps. And it's, if nothing else, it's in the right steps for other things to become legalized, you know.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a win-win for that side of it. And I think that's important, and I, like I always say on every show, I don't want to talk bad just about the bad. There is good stuff that the VA does do, and there is
Agreed.
there is good things that the pharmaceutical companies do. Not all of them are like you see on Netflix about the opiate crisis. Not all
Well,
pharmaceutical.
you know what the problem is? It's being able to separate, is keeping in mind that a pharmacist, a chemist, and a scientist, these are people that are doing professions. Now, when you have a business owner or a chairman of the board or a CEO, these are people that they're all about corporate and market and numbers and statistics. So don't blame the scientist. They're doing what they're supposed to. It's the ones that are on top of them that are the issue.
Yep.
So I agree with you 100%.
Yep. Yeah. It's when you mix money with kindness and goodness is
Ah,
when
Jesus. Yeah.
it becomes shitty. That's and that's I'll be honest, that's the one part about my nonprofit that is the struggle, because to do anything it takes money, and I hate the fundraising part. I hate going out there asking for donations and money. But the reality is it takes money to do things.
Right.
And so you have to figure out, well, how is it a win-win? How do I benefit somebody else? What is somebody getting for the money that they're giving me? And then what am I giving away with that money? What is the good that is coming out of it? You know, and it sometimes it is a tough balance.
It's like it's almost like a burden.
It is, you know, but
But you
it's
seem you seem like somebody that you care about awareness, and I know that you mentioned that you have 3 programs working together, and I think and I feel that it is important for there to be not just awareness, but awareness of understanding. Because again, we're having a conversation. I am no expert by any means, but you, as a person that have had that 20 years experience being in the military, and also your situation with your family and all of that taken in, there's a lot that you can give over, even though you're one soldier,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
So a lot of the stuff that I've done, I tripped over a rock and discovered it. That's and it started with my podcast. So the podcast that I have is called Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room, and it's a comedy based. Soldiers have a real dark humor about us. You know,
Uh-huh.
and when you hear us talk when we're out in the field, there's nothing appropriate about the stuff that we talk about. So that's where the name comes from. So a lot of people, when they hear that name, they instantly think that that's what the show's about. Well, the truth is, where that name came from is the show started from me and my old first sergeant. He had a little gun business. We spent a lot of time in his gun room, and I helped him build guns, and we did some hydro dipping, and we also
Oh,
enjoyed
nice.
drinking. And so that's what we did. I mean, you see, I got some bottles back there. He liked beer. So when I'd get off work, I'd go out there and he'd be drinking his beer, and I'd, help him build some ARs, or I'd do some hydro dipping for him or whatever. And well, one day we just, out of the blue, randomly, I said, you know, the VFW that we go to is shit. I said, why don't we just start a podcast? So we did. And he's like, well, what do you want to call it? I said, well, hell, we're always drinking in here. Why don't we call it Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room? And that's
Jesus.
literally how the name came about. It was a joke. And so if you go back through my season 1, we literally filmed it in his gun room. There's boxes of ammo being reloaded and everything all around.
That's real It's American.
Yeah, yeah.
Real American.
I think we were like banned from TikTok
Oh my
for like
god.
3 life sentences. Of this shit in the
Beautiful.
background, but after season 1, he ended up dropping off, and I just, I never rebranded it, and one day he may come back, and the name will still be Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. He was a part of it, but the whole thought process, in season 1 was about us pulling our old soldiers back together and bringing some camaraderie back together. And we would bring them on, and we'd talk about old stories, some old jokes, you know, and just have a good time. And
Getting into the mind of a veteran. I kind of like that. Or active.
yeah, I mean, I can tell you a funny story. I mean, we would pull some of these soldiers' wives even in this,
Oh,
and
God.
yeah, and so a funny story, right? We had this one soldier. We always joked with him because he just kind of he was that one guy that was real awkward around girls, could never get a girlfriend or whatever. So we always joked with him and told everybody that he would go home and put peanut butter on his crotch so that his dog would lick it, and that was his girlfriend, right? Well, he's married now, and he was outside live with us on um, the stream, and he said he hears this dog bark in the background, and my old first sergeant, without skipping a beat, he said, "What'd you do? Steal the neighbor's dog? You got peanut butter over there?" I mean, we ain't seen each other in like 15 years, and it still clicked in the back of his mind. Well, a soldier's wife got in the chat room and she goes, "You stole somebody's dog?" And Facebook banned her. She got put in Facebook jail for that statement. you know, the rest of us, we were good for everything that we
Oh,
just
my
talked about.
God.
But we got put in Facebook jail. But I mean,
Damn.
those are the kind of jokes, and that's what season one was about. It was just about good times, and it was a way for us to be able to interact with these guys, and we could tell when they were going through a hard time, and then we could reach out offline and say, "Hey, man, you seem kind of off," or they would even reach out to us and say, "Hey, man, I'm kind of going through a bad time. I'm glad you reached out." And that kind of exploded from there, as social media does, and especially with a couple of guys that don't know what the hell we're doing on social media. It just kind of expanded from there. And when he dropped off, I learned real quick that I wasn't very good staring at a camera by myself without a guest or anybody. And so I started reaching out and bringing people on to talk to, and somehow I started getting in my feed were all these musicians that were veterans, and I
Some of them
discovered
are really good.
that
Oh, my
I agree.
God.
I agree, and I discovered a problem that I had, but I didn't care about, but I seen they had as well, and I seen it meant a lot more. So as a podcaster, everybody knows if you care about stats, it's frustrating because you get buried in these algorithms, and you either have to have a bunch of money to advertise or be extremely smart on how you're doing things. It is tough. It is really tough to build the Joe Rogan platforms. I mean,
Can I be honest? I think I think Joe Rogan's days are numbered in regards to podcasting. But besides that, I do genuinely believe that the way to make a successful podcast is don't be fake.
I agree.
People are not interested in CNN and Fox and NBC anymore because they're like, hello, good morning. This is Kimberly with Good Morning America. I'm like, I cannot listen to that. It makes me sick physically and mentally. So you're right. It is a very tough thing to do. But I feel that if you're genuine and you're being honest and you're having a good time, you're bringing on veterans and people from all folks and whole forces from the military. Um, you create that really great balance. And even though it's difficult, hey, if you're doing something that's making you happy and it's
Exactly.
growing and you just keep on making those connections, I wouldn't stop.
Exactly. And that's the difference. For me, it didn't matter because I had a job. I wasn't doing it for an income. I was doing it because halfway through season one, I realized that this was bringing out things that I didn't talk about, things that my wife didn't even know about. I was starting to talk about stuff that I've never even shared with my own family. And
That's deep. Yeah.
It started feeling good, you know. If you go back, there's like again, there's episodes that I did in season one. There's episodes that I've done in season two that just things just kind of vomited out that I didn't plan for it to happen. It just the conversation went there and it just happened. Those days never happened before podcasting. They sure as hell didn't happen when I was sitting there talking to the VA therapist that looked at their watch wanting to know when it was time to get off work, you know. So I can tell you there is therapy in podcasting. And so for me, I could care less whether one person listened to my show or 10,000 people listened. It wasn't for them, it was for me. And at the same time, I was able to bring people on that I found interesting and had a story, and I could learn something that they had a piece in their life that could benefit me. Another 501c, another program that was out there that I didn't know about that I could share, whatever.
Another
And
nonprofit.
and that's what I loved about it. But when I came across these veteran musicians, they didn't have jobs. That was their job. And the days of selling CDs out of the back of your car to make a living are over with. And I can tell you now that I have a radio station, it will make you sick with what they get paid for every song. They don't even get paid a penny. It's 0.00224 and a whole bunch of numbers after that per song that you play of theirs. That's what they get paid in royalties, plus the membership fee every year. And then they get a percentage of any income that comes into the radio station.
Yeah, primarily they're making most of their money with advertisements. Yeah, which is why radios today just sound like your television.
So if they're not getting known, getting booked to go play somewhere, they're eating ramen. And that's why I said, well, fuck, if that's what it takes, if you need to get booked somewhere, which means you've got to get your music played. Because when I decided, why don't I just start this radio station? You know, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I seen an advertisement on Facebook that said start a radio station for $39.95. And I said, okay, let's do that. And then they'll just give me their music and I'll play their music. Well, then I discovered this thing called copyright and everything else, and it had to be turned into a business. And so I went and did all that. I paid for the licensing through BMI and ASCAP and all that stuff. And
All that jazz.
yep, I got it all legalized and all that stuff done. And everything else, and it did do what it was supposed to do. It did help some of these veterans that got put into other contacts and has been booked for other gigs, and that's what I wanted it to do, and I'm glad it did. But what I discovered was the most important part is if you're doing something with media that is also a form of therapy, and you start it not knowing that it's therapy. You know, you decide that you're going to start podcasting because you think you're going to become the next Joe Rogan, and you want to tell everybody about how jacked up the Democratic Party is, or whatever it is that you want to go share the world because you have a story out there and you think that the world's going to listen to you. And when you get on there and after about 2 months, you realize that you're spending all this money, and every time you turn around the corner, there's something else that you got to buy or something else that you need. And then you look at your stats and, maybe you got 500-600 downloads, well, you instantly become frustrated because your goal wasn't because you enjoyed it. It wasn't because you wanted to do it for therapy. It wasn't for anything pure. It was because you had something to say that you were pissed about. The only emotion that the veterans have that they know how to deal with is anger. So a lot of times the expression that they come out with is anger, and it kind of bleeds out. Well, so I decided to start this nonprofit. It's called Heroes Voices Media Foundation. And the idea behind it is we have what's called Military United podcast streams, and we take those guys. We take those guys that do gaming, podcasts, and we help them stick with it. That's the main goal. Keep doing it, right? The reason for that is at some point you're going to realize that it's not about the stats. It's about sticking with it until you find the therapy in it. Till you get to the point that you can start opening up, start talking about what's causing the anger, what it is that put you in that seat, what it is that you felt that you had to say, but you haven't figured out how to articulate, and it wasn't because of what was said on the news that pissed you off. It's something else that's inside you that causes that anxiety and everything else that drives you to do it.
It's
I know
accepting oneself.
it is.
I th- I think one of the the realizations is we as a society, we're very soft. I can say from my own personal experience. Look, I haven't dealt with military service or dealing with excess death. However, I have dealt with friends that have committed suicide. I've dealt with my father passing away during the pandemic, during the very first wave, which was insane. But communicating about that and being able to be open about it. Like you were saying, I mean, sitting there and waiting until your clock runs out so you can go home. We need to understand that just like physical health is important, so is mental health, and that is across the boards, including the military.
And the other disadvantage that veterans have is we are wired a little bit different. When we go through basic training, AIT, and all the other train ups for combat, you were hardwired to think and act differently. They give you everything that you need to survive, from equipment, weapons, all the way down to emotions. There is a reason why that when you go to the range to qualify, the target is not a bullseye. It's shaped like a human being. That's just a black silhouette, because what you're going to be firing at looks like a black silhouette when it's dark. They want you accustomed to shooting at a silhouette that is shaped like a person. And it's about wiring you to think that way. And so when you've done that for 10 years, going to the range and practicing shooting at a silhouette, well, when you go overseas, it becomes muscle memory. It's just hardwired into your mind. Well, the other thing that we're given is you deal with everything with anger. You can't do enough push-ups to pass your PT test. Well, get pissed off. Do more. Take that anger, focus it, and use that to pass your PT test. That is the training that we're given. Well, they don't give you the other side of that. So after you come back, you survived, you come back, you get out of the military. They don't teach you now that when you piss me off, I can't deal with things with anger. It is okay to have other emotions, fear, crying, those emotions. Well, those aren't in our toolbox. If you're crying, you're weak or you're broken. If you admit that there's something wrong, then you're broken. If you don't look like the guy to your left or your right, then you're fucked up. So all these things are wired into you. And I know it sounds weird, and it's like, well, why
Little
not?
intense.
Yeah. But when every day is like that, and that's the thought process, it's, think of it similar to this. And I do relate the military to this. I've always said this. The military is just like prison.
Hey, it's Dave, and I quickly just wanted to jump in and say if you've been enjoying the podcast and enjoying this episode, if you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that'll be so greatly appreciated. Because here's the thing, someone might read that review and make the choice if they want to listen to the podcast. you get to help grow this podcast with us. How fucking cool is that? Let's jump back to today's episode.
And the only difference is the concertina wire on the fence is pointed in the different direction. That is the only difference. When you're on a military base, it's a different world. You don't notice anything that's going on around the town outside it. You know, the way people talk, the way they dress, the way they act, the rules, everything's different. Well,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it the same way in a prison? If you were in a prison, you wouldn't know anything about what's going on outside that gate around the town.
I hate to make this horrifying comparison, but I like to compare a corporate office to a prison. The only difference is that you're given a key card to come in and out.
Yeah, you're right though. You know, and so that's the mindset. You know, when every day it's like that, you know, and everybody that you're interacting with thinks the same way, that becomes normal. You
But
know,
you know, it's interesting because you can view it as, why would the military do such a terrible thing to people? The thing to understand is that their job is to create the best soldiers. If they don't have the best soldiers, we get fucked. Vietnam. But
yeah,
in situations where things like that happen, they need to have their soldiers prepared. So, from what you're telling me, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it's not a really great situation if there's firearm going back and forth and you get a soldier just balls out crying on the battlefield. That's a really bad situation.
yep, I've seen it, but yeah, it it happens. You don't never know how people are going to react at the moment. You know, you know how everybody's trained, but in the moment, I've seen everything from people peeing their pants to crying to laughing to everything. You know, just at the end of the day, you know, you deal with it and you move forward. But you you have to just remember they're training you to do what they need done. When you get out, you know that they don't need anything. They don't need you to do anything when you get out. They don't care what you do. You know, they don't care if you get fixed.
It's a lot to process because we live in a very industrial age, and we as society have pushed more and more to a unhuman or almost artificial type of way of living. You know, I could say that I recently had a corporate job that I had for a year and a half. I no longer have that job, and I can happily say, thankfully, right now I work as a chef in a bar slash kitchen slash something else. But feeling human is so strange because when you felt unhuman for so long, you almost feel uncomfortable. You're like, where am I? Why do I feel this way? Why don't I have the energy to surpass this? Where am I going? And these are all circling in your head over and over and over and over again. Like you said, I mean, where is the handbook, you know?
Yeah, and you know, I think that's why, you know, the most dangerous time frame for a soldier, I think, is those first 2 or 3 years when they transition out from the military, because the expectation is like extremely let down. When you're getting out, you're like, thank God, as I'm headed out that gate, flipping them off, talking about finally done with this shit, you know. And then when you get out, you realize everything that I was is no longer it. I'm nobody now. The guy I was back then, where I had a purpose, I was in charge of things, I had responsibilities. Now every job interview I go to, I'm getting offered the entry level. I'm just a number. Nobody gives a shit about what I've done, you know. And it's kind of it's tough, you know.
Do you think that there was ever a time in this country where there was more respect for veterans than there is now?
So I heard a podcast, and I think it was on the Sean Ryan show, and it's the only thing I've ever heard that made sense to me. And I never thought about it, but if you go back to the World War One and Two time frame, right? The whole country was a part of that war. You were either fighting it or you were building something for it. And if you couldn't do either one of those two things, you was doing something in your house, cutting back on something or saving something to give for the cause, right? So everybody, the whole country was doing something for the troops on the battlefield. So everybody was a part of it. Well, the question that Sean asked this gentleman that was from the Second World War was they said, "Did you have PTSD when you came back?" And he said we didn't have PTSD. He said when we came back we had some bad dreams. He said, but that shit went away. And he said, so you didn't have PTSD? He said, why do all these troops now have PTSD, but you guys didn't? He said, I can tell you. He said, that's an easy one. He said, we had a war worth fighting for. He said, nobody after us has ever had a war worth fighting for. We've been fighting wars that we don't even belong in.
Yeah.
So you think about that. Vietnam, those
Oh
guys didn't even
God.
have anybody. Those guys didn't even have anybody to talk to. I mean, are you going to come back and
Jesus.
tell people about what has happened and how it's been when you get off the plane and everybody's spitting on you? You're not going to talk to anybody
In the
about it.
Afghanistan, you want to talk about like the Afghanistan war? I mean, regards of how that war started, on top of the fact that, I mean, we recently pulled out and let an entire country now controlled by a radical extremist group. Wonderful.
I, it's worse than that. We paid them to leave us alone so we could leave. That whole day at Abbey Gate where those 13
Jesus
soldiers were killed,
Christ.
the there was a Marine sniper that told his story. He's going to Congress. He'll be part of the testimony that when they investigate what went wrong there. Don't get me wrong; they're not going to do a damn thing to anybody. But he literally, so they 2 days, 2 or 3 days before the explosion, they had what the guy looked like and what his handler looked like, all the way down to what he was wearing, what kind of bomb it was, everything. And when he showed up, the sniper identified him. He called there was on the side of the gate, there was a British unit. He called over there. They identified him as a positive ID. He called his battalion commander. The battalion commander came down, looked at him, gave a positive ID. He then asked the battalion commander permission to shoot him. And the battalion commander said, I cannot give you that. And he said, who can? He said, I don't know. All right. So the day before that, there was a meeting between the Taliban and some of the head leadership. They walked out, a briefcase was handed to them, and they turned around and came back. He doesn't know for a fact, but the rumor was that there was money handed to them. And the deal was that we would not engage them and they would not engage at us. And they would allow us to go get people and bring up people in that was documented so that they could leave.
God almighty.
From that day forward, they would literally line women up and men up on their knees and execute them in front of the soldiers, trying to dare them to do something to them. And these soldiers would have to sit there and watch this and couldn't shoot them, couldn't respond because they were not documented. We did not know if they were, criminals or what the deal was. They were just women, and they were Afghanis, and they were not Americans, so we couldn't get involved. So they would literally put 6, 7 people on their knees and just walk behind them and just start shooting them in the head, you know. And then 2 days later, we can't even shoot the bomber. Oh, and then by the way, they moved all the barricades in front of that gate the day before the bomber got there,
It's
and then the
just a
rest you know.
mess. A
But
mess.
none of that was on the news. I didn't even know anything about that until the guy sitting in the chair that's missing, I think it was his left arm and his right leg, and had 150 some ball bearings taken out of his body, from that explosion. So
It
yeah,
is it is a good it is a good point to keep in mind that, like, yes, World War II happened a very long time ago, but a lot of what has changed this country has because of World War II. Like you said, the entire country was involved. I mean, I love cars. If you know anything about cars, the entire American car industry completely collapsed in 20 years from 1947 all the way up into the 80s. And hello, like 1939, 1945. Does any of these dates ring a bell to people? Like, to the point that I feel in many ways, I think the veterans are responsible for literally reconstructing the entire system of the United States after World War II.
yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
Crazy to think about it that way.
Yeah, it's just, and it kind of goes back to, so my ultimate goal with this nonprofit, you know, it isn't just about the mental side of it. I kind of got some big goals. So right now I'm in the building phases. I'm in the middle of building the Roku channel right now. But my big time goal, if I can get some bigger partners, because it's going to take money and some connections that I don't have. I want to build the you've heard of the CMAs, the Country Music Awards, and the Grammys, all that type of stuff. Well, I want the veteran version. I want the VMAs. I want the PMAs, the Podcaster Awards. I've got the third one that we haven't talked about is Warrior Words. It's going to be for authors and bloggers. And then the second one is the radio station, in case people didn't catch that. But I think that it would be nice to have that, and the reason why I say that is because, let's be honest, you spend 15, 18 years in the military. It is tough to get out of the military and then start a music career and think that you're going to sign a label and become the next Garth Brooks, because you are past that age that a lot of labels are looking for. You
Yeah.
know, you better have some extreme talent at that level, because that's like not being in college no more and one day showing up for tryouts at the NFL and doing a walk on is what that's like.
Yeah, the ER is going to have a really big bill for you.
Yeah.
Really big.
But there's the first artist that was on our radio station just signed a record deal.
Oh, nice.
He's currently recording a song with Dolly Parton.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's not impossible. Not that, and we had nothing to do with any of that. That was all him. But it is possible. He's got an amazing story. I mean, he's received 2 Purple Hearts. He was shot 10 times in Afghanistan. So,
And still singing.
and
Nice.
still, he didn't pick up a guitar till the pandemic. when he got out of the military, he was a gold medalist in archery as a Paralympic. And when COVID hit, well, there was no more Paralympics. So he started watching YouTube and learned how to play the guitar. And now he's a country music recording artist.
It
So
really, what it honestly really goes to show is the power of community. The thing is, as artists, veterans, crafters, and makers, the way to communicate is when we work together as a team. By you creating these platforms, a radio station, having a podcast, and having these bits and pieces where if people need a place after they serve, whether their artistic path or whatever they're trying to do, they're going to have a lot more appreciation from someone like you. Whereas some stocky up person that's never served before in their life, they don't know what it is to be on that other side. You know how to relate to them in that way.
and that is an important part, is surrounding these people with like-minded people, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of dark days, and to have a phone number or a Facebook Messenger with somebody that you can just reach out and say, man, I'm having a real shitty day. And he can say, what, you got some sand in your vagina or something? And everybody starts laughing,
I love that.
and then they can start talking, and they can relate to each other, and that's important, because the veteran community is a different breed. We know just when you need that foot up your ass or that hand up. We don't allow people just to play that victim card. You're going to get better, and we're not going to just sit there and spoon feed you. You're going to take responsibility, and we're going to move forward. And it's important that when you get to those points where you finally say enough is enough. And that's the other problem too, is the reason why healing takes so long for soldiers is because when they say that until you hit rock bottom, the healing won't begin. Well, the problem is when you look at some of these veterans and you say, are you done yet? Are you ready to start healing? And he says, oh yeah, hold my beer, I can go deeper. And he continues to keep fucking digging deeper and deeper and deeper, instead of just realizing, all right, I need some help.
Do you feel
And
that it? Do you feel that in many ways it's like the resilience, is to not letting go, is just to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
I think it's the same aspect of, if you admit that you need help, is the same as admitting that you failed. And in the military, you don't admit that you failed. You keep going until you get it right. Just because
Right.
you mess something up, that means you go back and you do it again, and you just keep going back until you pass it, and you get it done. And that's why the two things, nobody went into this war thinking it was going to be 20 years. I mean, it still blows my mind when I hear soldiers say that they came in the military and went straight into special forces and retired 20 years later in special forces. When I came in, you couldn't go straight into special forces out of basic training AIT. You had to be in for at least a year or two, and you had to be a PFC before you could even apply. Well, as the war went on, they needed people like any other part of the branch. So they opened it up to where if you could pass everything like anybody else, you could go straight into it from basic training. And people did. And I've had several people that was on my show that walked into a recruiter's office and said, I want to be a Green Beret. And they went to basic training, they went to AIT and to all the selection courses. And 20 years later, they retired out of the Army, and they never did anything but being a Green Beret. And it just blows my mind that we got people that went in the Army and fought the same war for 20 years. Their whole military career was combat.
One war.
Yeah.
So you were saying is like even in your experience, you had multiple tours. I mean, you were in different places. Whereas, wow, that's has I don't think that's ever happened
It hasn't,
before.
you know.
Crazy.
So I served 10 years in the special ops community, and at one point we were in. If you count the United States, we were in 5 different countries, one battalion. So when we deployed, we were deploying with teams of like 3 people because each section would have 3 people. So we'd have 20, 30 people in one country, another 20, 30, 40 people in another country, and then you rotated. You went 3 months over there, 3 months in the States, 3 months in another location, 3 months back in the States, 3 months in another location. That's why I was gone for so much.
You're going
you know
back and forth.
yep. We were so thin that the Iowa National Guard was called in to run our battalion headquarters in the States because we didn't have enough people to keep our
Did,
headquarters running.
did you say Iowa?
Yeah, the Iowa National Guard was called in. We were in Georgia, so they called the Iowa National Guard in to uh, to activate them.
Like the actual state, Iowa? Oh, that is so funny. It's funny because my host, she's also my best friend. We do American Groove. She's from Iowa. And I always joke with her, I'm like, what the hell do they do in Iowa? Like to even hear that of like Iowa National. Who calls the Iowa National Guard ever?
Well, I don't know who made the phone call, but that's who came. They spent a year running the base there, or running the our little section, our little headquarters.
So you really have had like all the different tastes and flavors.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Damn.
Only 2 places I haven't been is Kosovo. I never went to Kosovo, and I never went to Macedonia. Those are the only two, and I never went to Africa. I didn't do anything in Africa either.
Do you wish that you did, or it doesn't really matter at this point?
It doesn't matter to me. My recruiter told me I was going to see the world. He just left out the part that it was just the third world.
Oh wow.
you know,
I it's kind of strange because we tend to label countries as first world, third world, and it's interesting because a lot of these third world countries, they're some of the coolest places you can be, and yeah, they have smartphones, okay, and they definitely drive cars, and oh, guess what? They also have electricity, like most other places. It's that view or that focus on those areas that they want you to see. It's just
it's
it's not
part
the
of the.
whole picture.
No, that's it's. We're over there to help them. They need our help. I'm going to tell you right now, Iraq was not a third world country. We turned it into a third world country. You know, their doctors were all board certified American doctors. They were Iraqis, but to be an Iraqi doctor, you had to come to the United States and become a doctor from the United States. They were, Saddam sent all of his people that were doctors, and you went to college in America. Saddam Hussein has a college degree from the United States. So you're not going to have that many American educated people in your country, and your country is going to be a third world country. They had a stable currency until we went in and flattened it, and it was not a third world country. They had internet, they had everything. It appears to be a third world country because one guy controls everything.
Hmm.
The people can get on the internet that he controls. You know, he controls what websites they can see and what they can't see, and so forth. So just because they can't see everything that we can see doesn't mean it's not a third world country. You know,
It's all in the view of the spectator. And I think something that really kind of ties in, and it's really important that you brought up from like the beginning, is just understanding the situation for what it is.
Yep. And that's the other thing too, you know. And again, like I said at the beginning too, some of this has also opened my eyes that I still have a hard time with. I still hold feelings um, with things that happened over there. Um, you know, I don't like the
Sure.
terms as like racist and stuff like that, but it is. But the reality is, especially, you know, I just talking with Mr. Tim Heel on my last episode. It's when you're dealing with another soldier, how much we are alike. You know, he was talking about places, and I'm like, I know exactly where you're talking about. I've been there. I know the highway you were driving down. I've been there. I've been on that highway, and you know, we've been in the same areas. You know, we've walked the same sand. We fought in the same countries, and we're just soldiers doing a different mission. And when you think about it that way, the Iraqi soldiers are just soldiers doing a mission no different than what I was doing, just
Right.
on a different side. You know, I have nothing against Iraqi soldiers. I really don't. I feel a little different about Afghanistan. The the Taliban and the people there, that's evil. I'm going to tell you. I'll just call it as it is. Is if evil exists, if there's a such thing as demons, I can tell you they've got a whole tribe
Yeah.
because those people are just flat out evil.
And that's, kind of the thing that, I have family out in Israel, and I recently had somebody that I spoke with on the podcast. Like you said, like the extreme evil is like Al Qaeda, it's
Yeah,
Hamas, it is the Taliban, it is the what do you call the jihad. There's another insane group. These are these are groups that are whole purpose is death,
yeah.
is
I,
mass destruction,
I
nothing
had
else.
I had a friend that was on a mission. It was a joint mission between the Afghani army and our military. They went into a village. The commander was going in to talk to an elder, and they were guarding the house that the commander and the elder was in talking. My buddy and a Afghani soldier was in the front. They had a perimeter around the building, and the Afghani army guy pulled out a pistol and put it to my buddy's head and blew his head off. Took off running. You know, how do you fight against that? He's supposed to be, you know, we're supposedly we're on the same side. You know, we're here helping you get your country back, but there's no documentation. You know, so the guy joins the Afghani army, but really he's an Al Qaeda guy. Just put in the Afghani army. He got an opportunity to kill an American, and he took it and took off running. You know,
Yeah, it's
and
it kind of, I hate to say this, it kind of feels like a repeat of the Vietnam War, because it feels that in many ways we just continue the same pattern. It's where you put the blame on the wrong people. It's always the civilians that are at fault. It's never the. It's funny. It's never the extremist groups or the government. No, no, no. It's always the people's fault. Um, it's baffling because do you actually know like you mentioned, like undocumentation, just absolute uh, insanity. I
it
mean,
is.
think about how we got there and how we got out. Just those two parts. And you have to think to yourself, how does this make any sense?
Yeah,
Doesn't.
yeah,
It doesn't make any sense.
yep, none. You know, and I'm gonna tell you, you know, how dark and twisted your mind has to be. So they learned they're smart people. and they learned real quick that if they put boxes or garbage along the roads and put IEDs in it, we would avoid it. But we're pretty accustomed to roadkill, animals that are dead along the side of the road and stuff like that. So they started putting IEDs in dead dogs, cats, whatever they could find, and laying those on the road because we didn't think twice about it. What kind of person thinks about, if I shove a bomb up a dead dog's ass, the Americans don't move. They'll run over it or they'll run right next to it. They don't avoid it. They don't slow down and stop. You know?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, these people, they pay attention to our news, our livelihood, the way we walk, what we're accustomed to in America, because it transitions to the way we live over there.
You heard about recently what happened with, not Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden. This whole thing on TikTok. I mean, it's just, I'm supposedly a part of this young generation. I'm in my early 20s. I was born in 1999. But it's just insane how anybody in the right mind thinks any of this is not terrorism. It's like, no, we don't use that word anymore. What do you mean we don't use that word anymore? You were there. You were there in Iraq. You experienced all of this. I mean, can we be honest over here? Terrorism is a real thing. It's not made up.
That's like a guy robs somebody and then puts a gun to somebody's head, says, "Give me your money," and then shoots him, kills him. Well, that's not murder. That's not murder. That's a robbery with an accidental death. You know, really? So it's not murder now because we don't use that word no more.
No, it's accidental.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's exactly you. It doesn't matter what you call. You can call it whatever you want, but you better deal with it the same way because
We don't deal with it the same way.
no, we don't.
The way that we deal with it is that all over our colleges we're promoting terrorism. All over our social media we're promoting it. It's sickening because I can't even imagine somebody that fought for this country, right?
Mhm.
Did their terms and is now home with their families. Could be Jewish, could be Muslim, could be Christian, whatever. And they have to hear this. I mean, doesn't that kind of scare the living shit out of some people? They're like, "Oh my god. I remember what happened back there and all of this terror and now like nobody cares like what's going on over here." There is that, I feel, that extra added non-needed stress basically.
Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you, I have a different theory on this. So I think we're about to see the next war, the next major war. Call it World War III, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what they're going to call it because it's going to be a different type of war. We're seeing the beginning stages of it. And the reason why I say it's a different type of war is because it's not going to be necessarily troops on ground battle. There may be some fighting, but it ain't going to be like what we're seeing. It's going to be an economical war. It's going to be this disinformational type, treason type war. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So you had the Ukraine situation that happened,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden the Israel and Hamas situation happened. Is the Ukraine situation still going on, or did that just quit?
No, that's still going on. A lot of Ukrainians still dying.
Does the news know that? Because they sure don't talk about that no more.
No, they don't. I mentioned that before. It's like interesting. What happened to the Ukrainian war? We don't talk about that no more. It's not interesting enough.
It was similar because it was all about COVID until the Ukrainian war happened. It's like we can't focus on more than one thing at a time.
somebody's controlling the chessboard, and I think we know it's not who, it's whom.
So let me ask you a question. And
Sure.
somebody posed this theory to me, and it really does make sense, right? You look at all these protests and everything that's been happening, and that seems to be the go-to move when something new happens, everybody runs to the streets, right? But if you look at this, they try to make it look like it's like spare the moment. Everybody just ran and started protesting, but the signs look like they're professionally made. Somebody has to be funding this because the permits are paid for. So wouldn't it make sense that there has to be a money trail behind this is what I'm getting at. So if I was,
Mhm.
let's say if I was Hamas, right? I know I can't beat Israel in a straight up person to person war. So I'm gonna piss you off. I get the hornet's nest brewing. I'm gonna back away and I'm gonna go back in my little caves. And this is why we struggled trying to beat Afghanistan, is because they ran into their little caves, but now they enter this cyber war. I have never, I mean, it's like a real life actual meme that was happening in life when I seen somebody holding a sign that said LGBTQ supports Hamas or got supports Palestinians.
No, they don't. But yeah, I've seen
I'm
this.
like, I'm like, do you understand what would happen if you were walking down the street holding another girl's hand? I mean,
Yeah, I do know because I knew when I lived in Israel, I knew a Palestinian that was gay, and he would he would argue very differently than a lot of people.
yeah. So, and I just can't wrap my head that we have that many naive people in this world that all lived in that same cluster of people that got together that fast and was able to throw a protest together. But I do believe there's that many people that could be paid to hold whatever stupid sign you want me to hold. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I I understand. I hear what you're saying, and it's you make a very good point. The way that I kind of look at this is kind of what they did with the hippie movement. They they had all of these organizations creating all of these different things like the Manson family and so on and so forth. And they created this idea of like, oh, okay, now it's dead. So everybody, go back to your corporate jobs. That's better. You want to be blue collar your shit. Try to stay the middle class, whatever. They kept this kind of same stereotypical classic system. But now, what they're having the most difficulty is the fact that the hippie movement is stronger now than it has ever been because we have the internet. And we can fucking talk our asses off from today until tomorrow. So, in many ways, you are correct. But what they're not realizing is they're fueling people like us to actually continue what they're trying to stop. It's so fucking insane when you think about it. We're doing exactly the opposite of what they're telling us not to do. And
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I'm arrogant or in a way. We as people, podcasters like us, artists, creators, veterans, and so forth, might be the people that change what happens in the next 10 or 15 years. We don't know. But hey, we've been doing this for an hour. It might be doing something.
I agree. I think podcasting, if nothing else, will get people at least start thinking for themselves.
Got to start somewhere.
Yep, I agree. I agree, man.
Cool. All right. So, kind of boiling this down so we can be able to figure out where do you find yourself. So, you got your podcast. You mentioned you have a book, and then also you have your radio station and your nonprofit. If anybody wants to find your work, what's the easiest place to do so?
So you can go to our nonprofit website. It's Heroes Voices Media Foundation.org.
Okay.
You can also go to the radio station's main page. Everything branches off that as well. It's gunroomradio.org. You can also go to any of the Facebook pages, which is the same thing, just at Facebook. You can go to my podcast page, twodrunkdudesinagunroom.com, and everything links together. So if you go to any of those pages, you can find any of the other pages from those.
Perfect. So. Yeah, and of course I'm going to leave in the description the links so everybody will be able to find them. And again, it is something that's really important. Working together as a community, one artist is one thing, but when you have people working together, bringing guests on, conversation after conversation, there's a real change and there is a real possibility.
I agree.
Oh man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Donald. Well, before I forget, if you want to find the podcast, we're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. With that, it's been an hour and 20 minutes. I think we're going to wrap this up. All right, man, this has been awesome. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.